If I told you that you could slow the growth of a tumor simply by reaching into your pantry and, throwing away your cooking oil, you would probably call me crazy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive right out of the gate.
Right, because when we think about major medical breakthroughs like the kinds of things that legitimately change the trajectory of a deadly disease, our minds naturally gravitate toward multi-million dollar pharmaceutical labs.
Yeah, you picture complex chemical compounds or maybe cutting-edge genetic therapies.
Exactly. Teams of scientists in white coats. We
Absolutely.
definitely don't think about the salad dressing sitting in the fridge or the oil we use to fry our eggs in the morning.
No, we really don't. And
Yeah.
that's exactly the paradigm we need to challenge today.
Because today we are going to look at some clinical data that completely flips that assumption on its head. I mean, what if one of the most profound biological levers you can pull to actively reduce systemic inflammation, protect your immune system, and this is the staggering part, even alter the behavior of cancer cells, is hidden in something as deceptively simple as the fats you consume every single day.
Well, it is staggering,
Yeah.
but it makes sense when you realize that we have this very ingrained, almost cultural habit of viewing the fats we eat as completely passive.
Passive in what way? Like just sitting there.
Yeah, exactly. For decades, we've been taught to look at a nutrition label, check the fat grams, and essentially equate that number to a math problem.
Yeah.
We think of fat purely as stored energy, calories in, calories out.
Right? I just picture it as like fuel for the furnace. Or
Yeah.
just extra weight if I eat too much.
Most people do. But from a biochemical perspective, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of human biology. Dietary fats are not passive passengers in your body. They are highly active, potent biological messengers.
Messengers. So they're actually communicating with our cells.
Exactly. The second they are digested and enter your bloodstream, they are transmitting complex instructions to your cells. And depending on the specific molecular structure of the fat you are eating, those instructions vary wildly.
So they could be telling the body to do good things or bad things.
Precisely. They are either telling your immune system to stand down and repair your tissues,
Mm.
or they are sounding an alarm that actively fuels disease.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is the perfect framing for our mission on this deep dive. We are taking a magnifying glass to the fats that completely dominate our modern plates.
And they really do dominate. They're inescapable unless you know what to look for.
Yeah, so we are going to explore the rise of industrial seed oils. We're going to dissect the absolutely critical biological balance between omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And we are going to trace the exact cellular mechanisms that link the oils we cook with to the explosion of chronic diseases.
Which is where the really compelling science comes in.
Right. We'll be looking at some truly groundbreaking clinical research on how dietary fats specifically impact prostate cancer, which I think changes the entire conversation around nutrition. But before we get to the clinical trials and the cellular biology, we need to understand the environment we are living in.
We have to set the stage, definitely.
So what exactly are seed oils, and how did they become the absolute default ingredient in seemingly every single thing we eat?
To really grasp the scope of this, we need to define what we mean by seed oils because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot right now.
Right. You see it all over social media.
Yeah. We are talking about highly refined industrial vegetable oils extracted directly from the seeds of plants.
So not things like olive oil or butter?
No, completely different processing.
Mm.
The major players, and the ones that can practically guarantee you're sitting in your kitchen pantry or hiding in your snacks right now, are canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, safflower oil, and cottonseed oil.
And they are truly everywhere. I actually did a bit of a kitchen audit before we sat down to record this.
Oh, I love when people do this. What did you find?
I went into my pantry and looked at my favorite box of like healthy artisan crackers, the kind with the beautiful packaging that promises whole grains and all natural ingredients.
Let me guess. Soybean oil.
Yes. Soybean oil was the second ingredient listed. I felt completely betrayed. And then I looked at my favorite vinaigrette, and the main oil was sunflower oil. Why are these specific oils so ubiquitous?
Well, it comes down to a perfect storm of economics, industrialization, and early food engineering. The history here is actually fascinating and vital to understanding why our biology is currently struggling.
Take us back. How did this start?
If you go back to the late 1800s, things like cottonseed oil weren't considered human food at all.
Wait, really? What were they used for?
Cottonseed was literally a toxic waste byproduct of the cotton farming industry. They didn't know what to do with it, But then industrialists realized that through heavy chemical processing, heating, bleaching, and deodorizing, they could turn this waste product into an incredibly cheap fat.
So they basically took toxic waste and processed it until it didn't smell terrible anymore.
Essentially, yes. And then by the early 1900s, through a chemical process called hydrogenation, they figured out how to make these liquid oils solid at room temperature.
Ah, so that's where Crisco comes in.
Exactly. Crisco was introduced in 1911 as a cheaper alternative to lard or butter.
So from the very beginning, this wasn't about health or nutrition at all. It was about taking an agricultural waste product, running it through a chemical plant, and selling it as a cheap substitute for traditional animal fats.
You hit the nail on the head. And the food industry absolutely fell in love with these oils for two primary reasons.
Let me guess, money is one of them.
Always. First, they are pennies on the dollar to produce compared to olive oil, butter, or tallow. Second, and more importantly for modern supermarkets, they have an extraordinarily long shelf life.
Because they're so highly processed.
Right. They are highly stable at room temperature for months, if not years. If you are manufacturing packaged snacks, baked goods, or crackers, seed oils are the ultimate ingredient. They ensure your product can sit on a shelf for a year without going rancid.
Which is great for corporate profits, but maybe not so great for our bodies.
Exactly. Consequently, they became the undisputed standard for the entire processed food industry, the fast food industry, and eventually they were marketed to consumers as the standard vegetable oil for home cooking.
Right. The bottle just says vegetable oil in friendly green letters. Maybe there's a picture of a sun setting over a cornfield, and you think, well, vegetables are good for me. This must be a healthy choice.
It's brilliant marketing, but it's deeply misleading.
So this is where we have to look under the hood. What is the actual biological makeup of these oils? Because the defining characteristic, the thing that separates them from olive oil or butter, is their massive concentration of omega-6 fatty acids.
Yes, and this is where we need to introduce some nuance, because human biology is never, completely black and white.
Right.
Omega-6 fatty acids are not inherently toxic. In fact, in the medical and nutritional literature, they are classified as essential fatty acids.
Essential meaning our bodies cannot synthesize them from scratch, right? We're required to get them from our diet in order to survive.
Precisely. You absolutely require a baseline level of omega-6s for physiological function. In small, natural doses, they are structural components of your cell membranes.
So they actually build the cells.
Yeah, they play a role in how your cells produce energy, and they are vital precursors for regulating certain hormones and inflammatory responses.
Okay, so if they're essential, what's the problem?
Well, if you had zero omega-6 in your diet, you would eventually suffer severe health consequences. So the issue we are facing today is not the mere presence of omega-6s. The issue is the staggering, historically unprecedented dosage. We are dealing with a severe distortion of a critical biological ratio.
Let's dig into that ratio, because this seems to be the linchpin of the whole problem. Walk me through what this ratio of fats is supposed to look like in a healthy, historically normal human body versus what is happening inside us today.
If we look at this through the lens of evolutionary biology, human beings evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, consuming a diet where dietary fats were relatively balanced.
Because we were hunting and gathering.
Right. We got our fats from wild game, fish, nuts, and foraging. In that environment, the ratio of omega-6 fatty acids to omega-3 fatty acids, omega-3s being the highly anti-inflammatory fats found primarily in seafood, was very close to 1-to-1.
So equal parts, 1 part omega-6 to 1 part omega-3. Just perfect biochemical harmony.
Exactly. Complete biological equilibrium. Your body evolved to operate specifically under those parameters.
But I'm guessing the invention of Crisco and cheap soybean oil threw a wrench into that.
Obliterated it, honestly. The advent of industrial seed oils and the modern Western diet has absolutely wrecked that equilibrium. Because cheap seed oils are now the foundational ingredient in almost all processed foods, restaurant meals, and cooking staples, our consumption of omega-6s has skyrocketed exponentially over the last century.
Well, our omega-3 intake probably dropped, right? Because people don't eat as much wild fish.
Exactly. Simultaneously, our intake of rich omega-3 sources has plummeted. As a result, the average modern diet has skewed that delicate 1-to-1 ratio up to 15-to-1.
15 to 1. That's insane.
And in many cases, upwards of 20-to-1 in favor of omega-6s.
20 to 1. That is a massive distortion. But let me pause you right there and play devil's advocate for a moment, because I know there are listeners thinking this right now.
Go for it.
For the last 40 or 50 years, major health organizations explicitly told the public to stop eating saturated fats like butter and to switch to vegetable oils, primarily because they lower LDL cholesterol.
Yes, that was the standard advice for decades.
So why is having 20 times more of an essential fat a bad thing? If omega-6s are building blocks for our cells, doesn't having a massive surplus just give the body more materials to work with?
That is a very logical question, and it speaks to the well-intentioned but highly flawed nutritional advice of the late 20th century. It is true that replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated seed oils can lower serum LDL cholesterol in the short term.
So the doctors weren't totally lying?
No, they were looking at a specific metric.
Yeah.
But human biology is vastly more complex than a single cholesterol marker. Our bodies do not function like a warehouse where a larger stockpile of building materials is inherently better.
Right, it's an ecosystem.
Exactly. Biological systems rely entirely on homeostasis, on delicate, precise balance.
So more isn't better, more is just disruptive.
Let me give you an analogy. Think of your cellular biology like a massive symphony orchestra.
Okay, I like that.
You absolutely need the brass section. They are an essential part of the music. That is your baseline omega-6 requirement.
Got it.
But if you suddenly multiply the brass section by 20, while keeping the rest of the orchestra exactly the same, you don't get a better symphony.
No, you just get blasted with trumpets.
Right. The brass completely drowns out the strings, the woodwinds can't be heard, the audience is deafened, and what was supposed to be a beautiful piece of music descends into absolute chaos.
I love that analogy. It perfectly illustrates how an essential nutrient can become a destructive force just by, altering the volume.
Right. When you flood the human body with a 20-to-1 ratio of omega-6s, those fats stop acting as helpful baseline building blocks.
What do they do instead?
Due to their molecular structure, polyunsaturated fats are highly prone to oxidation. When you consume them in these massive unnatural quantities, they act as a severe systemic stressor.
Meaning they stress out the whole body.
Yes. And that disruption leads us directly into the primary devastating consequence of the modern diet: chronic inflammation.
Okay, let's wade into those waters, because inflammation is probably the single most overused buzzword in the wellness space right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's slapped on everything.
People talk about it constantly, but it often feels like a very vague, abstract concept. What is practically happening inside the body when it is trying to process a 20-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3?
To understand the actual damage occurring, we have to draw a hard line between acute inflammation and chronic inflammation, because biologically they are completely different events.
So acute is short-term.
Yes. Acute inflammation is actually a miracle of evolution. It is a natural, necessary, and life-saving defense mechanism.
Like when you get hurt.
Right. If you accidentally slice your finger with a kitchen knife, or if you inhale a nasty flea virus, your body immediately triggers an acute inflammatory cascade. It dilates blood vessels, rushes white blood cells and immune factors to the site of the injury, attacks the invading pathogens, and initiates the healing of the tissue.
It's the emergency response team rushing to the scene. It turns on, it does the job, and then it goes home.
Exactly. The key characteristic of acute inflammation is that it has definitive off switch.
The job ends.
Once the threat is neutralized, the body releases anti-inflammatory compounds, many of which are derived directly from omega-3 fatty acids, by the way, to calm the system down and return to baseline.
Okay, so that's the healthy version. Where does it go wrong?
It goes wrong because omega-6 fatty acids, at their biochemical core, are precursors to pro-inflammatory signaling molecules. Specifically, they are converted into a substance called arachidonic acid, which the body uses to generate inflammation.
Wait. So if you are eating a diet where 20 out of every 21 fat molecules is an omega-6...
You are constantly, relentlessly feeding your body the raw chemical materials required to manufacture inflammation.
And there's no off switch.
There is never a break. Because you are consuming these processed seed oils at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the off switch never gets flipped. Your immune system is effectively tricked into believing it is under constant, generalized attack.
That sounds exhausting for the body.
It is. It becomes trapped in a state of hypervigilance, continuously deploying inflammatory chemicals throughout your entire vascular system, your joints, and your organs, day after day, year after year. That is the clinical definition of chronic inflammation.
I've heard chronic inflammation described like setting a controlled fire in your backyard to burn off some dead leaves, which is fine. That's acute inflammation. It's doing a job.
A great way to picture it.
But if you come out every single morning and pour a fresh gallon of gasoline on that fire, eventually it burns out of control, jumps the fire pit, and burns down the entire neighborhood. Is that essentially what we are doing to ourselves with these oils?
That is a very visceral way to look at it, yes.
Yeah.
But let me offer an analogy that gets a bit closer to the actual immune mechanism, because it's vital to understand exactly how this leads to disease.
Walk me through it.
Imagine your immune system as a highly advanced IT security team for a massive corporation.
Okay, IT security.
Their primary job is to watch the network for major catastrophic threats, like a sophisticated hacker trying to breach the mainframe and steal all the data. In your body, that hacker is a rogue mutating cancer cell.
Okay, I'm with you. The immune system is the cybersecurity team, and the cancer is the hacker.
Right. But suddenly, because you are eating a 20-to-1 ratio of highly oxidizable omega-6 seed oils, the network gets hit with a massive, unrelenting wave of low-level spam.
Like junk mail.
Exactly. 50,000 junk emails a day. Your password has expired. Click here for a gift card. That is the constant low-grade systemic inflammation caused by the diet.
So what does the IT team do?
The IT security team, your macrophages, your T cells, your white blood cells, becomes completely overwhelmed. They're running around frantically, expending all their energy trying to delete this endless flood of junk mail.
So they are entirely distracted.
Exactly. They're exhausted, their resources are depleted, and their bandwidth is completely maxed out dealing with the inflammatory fallout of the food you just ate.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going.
So when that highly sophisticated hacker, the rogue cancer cell, quietly breaches the firewall, the security team simply misses it.
They don't even see it coming.
They do not have the metabolic energy or the situational awareness to identify the true threat and neutralize it. By pouring gasoline on the fire or by flooding the spam filter, you are effectively disarming your own immune system.
So we are creating the perfect storm.
Yes. You create a weakened, distracted biological environment where serious life-threatening diseases can easily take root, grow, and thrive.
That is terrifying. It completely reframes how we should view the food we eat. We aren't just giving ourselves a stomachache or putting on a few pounds. We are fundamentally distracting our internal defense systems.
It's a systemic vulnerability.
And this brings us to the clinical data. Because this isn't just an abstract theory about why we might feel sluggish after eating fast food. This mechanism has highly measurable life or death consequences. I was looking at this fascinating data out of UCLA, led by Dr. William Aronson. And it specifically focuses on how this exact mechanism dictates the progression of prostate cancer.
Yes. The research coming out of UCLA is paradigm shifting.
Why is that? Haven't we always known diet affects cancer?
Well, for a long time, nutritional oncology was somewhat murky. It was hard to isolate variables. But Dr. Aronson's work cuts through the noise because of how rigorously the clinical trial was designed. They wanted to isolate the specific impact of dietary fat ratios on cancer that was already present in the body.
Walk me through the setup. Who were the subjects and what exactly did they ask them to do?
The study focused on a cohort of 100 men who had all been diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer.
Okay, so this is a critical distinction. These were not healthy men looking to prevent disease. These were men actively living with a cancer diagnosis.
Exactly. And the researchers tracked these patients for 1 full year.
That is a long time to maintain a controlled dietary intervention. How did they split them up?
They divided the 100 men into 2 distinct groups. Group A, the intervention group, was placed on a diet specifically engineered to flip that dangerous ratio we talked about.
So they fixed the 20-to-1 problem.
Yes. The researchers aggressively lowered the patient's omega-6 intake by strictly removing industrial seed oils from their diet. Simultaneously, they drastically increased their omega-3 intake, providing them with whole food sources like wild-caught salmon, walnuts, and flax seeds.
So Group A is essentially cutting off the fuel supply for the inflammation and sending in the anti-inflammatory firefighters. What did Group B do?
Group B served as the control group. They were simply instructed to maintain the standard Western diet.
Meaning they kept eating the seed oils.
Right. There was no targeted reduction in seed oils and no prescribed increase in omega-3s. They just kept eating the typical, highly processed omega-6 dominant diet that most people consume every day.
Okay, so a 1-year trial. 100 men with early-stage prostate cancer. Group A gets the omega-3 rich, low seed oil diet. Group B gets the standard Western diet. When I read the results of this, my jaw actually dropped.
The numbers are staggering.
Group A, the men who actively altered their fat intake, saw a 15% decrease in their tumor aggressiveness over that year.
A physical reduction in aggressiveness.
Right. But Group B, the men who just kept eating standard cooking oils and processed foods, saw a massive 24% increase in their tumor growth markers.
Those numbers are absolutely profound, and they deserve to be repeated. A 15% decrease in aggressiveness versus a 24% increase.
So you are looking at nearly a 40% swing in the biological trajectory of a highly dangerous disease, dictated entirely by the biochemical instructions provided by the fats that these men were eating.
Entirely by the fats.
Wait, a 24% increase in a single year, just from continuing to eat the standard American diet.
Yes. And what is most revelatory about Dr. Aronson's data is that it completely redefines the role of nutrition.
How so?
We generally think of healthy eating as a preventative measure, right? Eat your broccoli so you don't get sick 30 years from now.
Yeah, that's what we're all taught.
But these men already had tumors. This study demonstrates that dietary fats are capable of altering the active progression of an existing cancer.
That's incredible.
The omega-3s were actively exerting a protective, suppressive effect on the tumor cells, while the omega-6s in the standard diet were actively accelerating the disease.
But how? I really want to look under the hood here. We know that the immune system is distracted, but how does the soybean oil in a salad dressing physically speed up the growth of a tumor while a piece of salmon slows it down? What is the actual microscopic cellular machinery at work here?
To understand the how, we have to look at the exact cellular pathways that these fats hijack. There is incredibly detailed research that maps this out.
Break it down for me.
When you consume large amounts of omega-6 fatty acids, your body breaks them down through metabolic processes. We discussed earlier how they are converted into arachidonic acid.
Right, the stuff that causes inflammation.
Well, that acid is then acted upon by specific enzymes to create inflammatory compounds. The most critical enzyme in this entire process is one called COX-2.
COX-2, COX-2. What exactly does that do? Let's break this down like I'm 5 years old.
Cyclooxygenase 2, or COX-2, is basically a massive biological catalyst for inflammation. Think of it as the master switch in a factory that manufactures inflammatory chemicals.
Okay, I can picture that, a big on switch.
Research shows that when excess omega-6s flood the system, they heavily upregulate or turn on this COX-2 enzyme. And when COX-2 is active in the presence of cancer cells, it acts like a massive biological accelerator.
Meaning it tells the cancer to grow?
It sends chemical signals to the abnormal cells, telling them to rapidly divide and proliferate.
So the fat literally flips the switch that tells a tumor to grow faster.
Yes, but it is actually much more insidious than just signaling growth. The chronic inflammation driven by the omega-6 and COX-2 pathway actively promotes a terrifying biological process known as angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis. So angio meaning blood vessels and genesis meaning creation, the creation of new blood vessels.
Exactly. Now, in a healthy body, angiogenesis is a vital process. If you suffer a deep wound, your body needs to build new blood vessels to supply oxygen and nutrients to the repairing tissue.
Which makes sense. It needs plumbing to heal.
Right. But in the context of oncology, angiogenesis is a tumor's best friend. You see, when a microscopic tumor first develops, it is isolated. It doesn't have its own blood supply, which severely limits how large it can grow. It is essentially starving.
It's just a tiny clump of cells.
But the systemic inflammation caused by an excess of omega-6 fats actually triggers angiogenesis in the vicinity of the tumor.
Wait, are you saying that inflammation builds plumbing for the cancer?
That is precisely what happens. The inflammatory compounds act like a chemical flare gun, signaling the body's vascular system to sprout brand new capillaries and blood vessels that route directly into the tumor matrix.
Oh my God.
The tumor effectively hijacks your body's healing mechanisms to secure a dedicated pipeline of oxygen and nutrients, allowing it to grow unchecked and eventually metastasize.
That is unbelievable. By eating a diet overwhelmingly rich in industrial seed oils, you are inadvertently creating a highly inflamed biochemical environment that literally lays down fresh piping to feed a tumor.
It is cellular sabotage. The omega-6 overload exhausts the immune system so it can't fight the tumor. It activates the COX-2 enzyme to accelerate cellular division, and it triggers angiogenesis to ensure the tumor has an unlimited food supply.
Okay, so that perfectly explains the 24% increase in the control group. But let's look at the other side of the coin. How did Group A in the UCLA study achieve a 15% decrease? What do the omega-3s in the salmon and the walnuts actually do to stop this plumbing from being built?
Omega-3 fatty acids operate on the exact opposite biochemical pathways. They possess profound anti-inflammatory properties.
So they fight the inflammation.
When you saturate your cell membranes with omega-3s, they actively inhibit the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines.
Cytokines, those are the messenger proteins, right? The signals telling the immune system to freak out.
Correct. If cytokines are the chemical alarm bells shouting fire throughout the body, omega-3s act like a molecular mute button.
A molecular mute button, I like that.
They walk right up to those cells and essentially cut their microphones. By doing this, omega-3s actively suppress the activation of the COX-2 enzyme.
And if the enzyme is off?
If COX-2 is turned off, the signal for abnormal angiogenesis is halted. The tumor is suddenly denied its new blood supply.
So it's basically starving the tumor out.
Yes, you are dismantling its supply lines. And by putting out the generalized inflammatory fire, your immune system, your internal IT security team, can finally recover.
They stop fighting the spam.
Exactly. It regains its bandwidth, stops fighting the phantom war caused by the seed oils, and gets back to its primary job of identifying and destroying rogue, abnormal cells in the bloodstream.
Now, the UCLA trial was specifically focused on prostate cancer. Is this biological mechanism like the COX-2 activation, the angiogenesis, the cytokine suppression, is this unique to the prostate, or is this a broader vulnerability in the human body?
It is a systemic universal vulnerability. The biological pathways we are detailing are fundamental to how tumors operate, regardless of the tissue of origin.
Do we have data on other cancers?
We have extensive data confirming this reality. For instance, research published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation looked broadly at high omega-6 intake and tumor progression. They found that this exact same inflammatory mechanism directly accelerates tumor growth in both breast cancer and colon cancer.
Wow. Breast and colon cancer, too?
Across the board, an excess of these refined polyunsaturated oils leads directly to more aggressive, faster-growing forms of cancer.
So this mechanism is potent enough to feed tumors, lay down blood vessels to supply them, and accelerate multiple types of cancer. Which begs a huge, incredibly sobering question.
What's that?
If this invisible inflammatory wildfire is doing this to patients who are actively battling cancer, what is it doing to the rest of the population? Like, if you are just a relatively healthy person walking around feeling fine, but you're eating a standard diet full of crackers, fast food, and seed oils, what is this internal environment doing to you?
That is the million-dollar public health question. And the scientific literature provides a very clear answer. The devastating impact of this dietary imbalance extends far beyond the realm of oncology.
What else is it causing?
We can look to extensive data out of the Cleveland Clinic, which deeply explored the systemic, full-body toll of seed oils. They found that the exact same state of chronic inflammation that drives angiogenesis in tumors is also the foundational root cause of almost every other modern chronic disease.
What kind of diseases are we talking about here? Because it seems like every year, the baseline health of the population gets worse.
We are talking about the primary drivers of morbidity and mortality in the modern world. The research explicitly links the chronic systemic inflammation caused by excess omega-6s to the development of cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and a wide array of autoimmune conditions.
Let's connect those dots. If my body is bogged down by this 20-to-1 ratio and my immune system is distracted trying to process all these oxidized fats, it means my defenses are lowered across the board. So whether the threat is a rogue cancer cell trying to establish a blood supply, or insulin resistance creeping into my muscle cells, or plaque forming in my arteries, the security guards are simply too exhausted to intervene.
That is exactly how an impaired, overwhelmed biological system functions. It is a cascading failure.
Just snowballs.
The modern diet continuously triggers the inflammation. The unrelenting inflammation exhausts the immune system and damages the vascular lining. And the exhausted system allows chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and cancer to march right through the front door without resistance.
I am not going to lie, looking at the sheer ubiquity of seed oils, the fact that they are in our bread, our oat milk, our salad dressings, our restaurant meals, it can feel incredibly discouraging.
It's very overwhelming at first glance.
It feels like this invisible hazard is absolutely everywhere and the cellular damage is already done. But, and this is a massive but, the research also offers some of the most empowering news I have ever read regarding how quickly human biology can adapt.
Yes, and this is where the science pivots from being deeply concerning to being highly optimistic.
Thank goodness.
The cellular damage caused by seed oils is very real, but it is not a permanent, irreversible state. Human biology is astonishingly resilient and highly responsive to environmental inputs.
So we can fix it.
The moment you begin to shift that dietary fat ratio back toward equilibrium, the moment you actively reduce the omega-6 load and flood the system with omega-3s, your body immediately begins to downregulate those inflammatory pathways.
Let's look at the clinical data on that turnaround. There was a study published in the Frontiers of Physiology in 2022. What happened when people actually made this deliberate dietary shift?
The 2022 Frontiers of Physiology study essentially proved that you can actively engineer your way out of chronic systemic inflammation.
How fast did it happen?
Very quickly. They demonstrated that by deliberately removing industrial seed oils from the diet and simultaneously increasing omega-3 intake, patients experienced a rapid, highly significant drop in systemic inflammatory markers.
So it didn't just halt the ongoing damage, it actively reversed it.
It radically improved their overall health baseline and dramatically reduced their long-term risk markers for chronic disease.
And the Cleveland Clinic data echoed this as well, specifically looking at the metabolic side of the equation, right?
Exactly. The Cleveland Clinic focused heavily on how repairing this fat ratio impacts metabolic function. When you adopt a diet rich in omega-3s and low in oxidized omega-6s, you fundamentally optimize how your body processes and utilizes energy.
What does that mean for everyday health?
The researchers documented that shifting the ratio improves insulin sensitivity, enhances fat metabolism, drastically aids in weight management, and serves as a frontline defense in preventing metabolic syndrome.
Which is the direct precursor to both type 2 diabetes and severe cardiovascular disease.
Exactly. It's reversing the root cause.
What I love about this is how much agency it gives us. We started this conversation by pointing out that we always expect major medical shifts to come from a pharmacy or a high-tech lab.
Right, a magic pill.
But this data says something entirely different. It says that you have the literal power to alter your cellular biology, to optimize your metabolism, to mute inflammatory cytokines, and to pull your immune system back from the brink of total exhaustion.
All without a prescription.
Yes. Not with a massive medical intervention, but with deliberate, informed choices at the grocery store. You are just giving your body the exact raw materials it evolved to use to heal itself.
It is the ultimate manifestation of therapeutic nutrition.
Yeah.
You are quite literally rebuilding the structural membranes of your cells and reprogramming your immune response with every single meal you choose to eat.
Okay, so the science is undeniably clear. The 20-to-1 ratio is a biological disaster. The 1-to-1 or even a 2-to-1 ratio is the goal. But knowing why we need to change is only half the battle.
Application is everything.
Right. How do we translate this intense cellular biochemistry into a Tuesday night dinner? We need to do a kitchen audit. Let's break down the highly actionable steps, the specific swaps, and the hidden traps listeners need to look out for starting today.
The kitchen audit is the most critical step you can take, because this is where all the scientific theory becomes daily practice. To effectively shift your ratio, you have to approach it from two directions simultaneously.
What's the first direction?
First, you must aggressively remove the concentrated, unnatural sources of omega-6. Second, you must deliberately introduce whole food sources of omega-3.
Let's start with the removal phase. I am standing in my kitchen. What bottles of cooking oil need to go in the trash immediately?
You need to completely and permanently ditch canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, and cottonseed oil.
Just throw them out.
If you have bottles of these sitting in your pantry or by your stove, they are doing your biology no favors whatsoever. They are the primary engines driving the omega-6 overload, and they are highly prone to oxidation.
Okay, so those are out. The pantry is clear. But we still need to cook. What do we adopt in their place for our standard, everyday cooking foundation?
For standard low to medium heat applications, things like making homemade salad dressings, very light sautéing, or drizzling over roasted vegetables, you want to rely on high-quality extra virgin olive oil and cold-pressed avocado oil.
Why are those better?
These oils possess a completely different chemical architecture. They are very low in polyunsaturated omega-6s and are densely packed with heart-healthy monounsaturated fats. They do not trigger the inflammatory cytokine cascade we spent the last hour discussing.
But I want to push back on this slightly. What about high-heat cooking?
That's a great question.
If I am trying to sear a steak or if I am roasting broccoli in the oven at 425 degrees, olive oil tends to smoke and degrade. The data highlights four specific fats that are optimal for high heat. What are they, and biochemically, why are they better?
This is a vital distinction, and it comes down to molecular bonds. The four fats highly recommended for high heat cooking are beef tallow, grass-fed butter, ghee, which is clarified butter with the milk solids removed, and coconut oil.
Tallow, grass-fed butter, ghee, and coconut oil. Why these four?
It relates directly to how these fats react to thermal stress. Seed oils are polyunsaturated. Poly means many, and unsaturated means they contain multiple double molecular bonds.
Okay, chemistry class. What's wrong with double bonds?
In chemistry, a double bond is an area of extreme instability. It is a fragile point where oxygen can easily attach. When you apply high heat to a polyunsaturated fat like putting canola oil in a 400-degree skillet, those fragile double bonds break apart and react violently with oxygen.
So they basically burn up at a microscopic level.
This is called lipid peroxidation. You are literally creating highly toxic, oxidized inflammatory compounds in the pan before the food even enters your mouth.
So you are basically cooking with pre-oxidized stress.
Exactly. But saturated fats like beef tallow, butter, or coconut oil are entirely different. They're called saturated because all of their carbon bonds are fully saturated with hydrogen atoms.
So there are no fragile double bonds.
None. Their molecular structure is incredibly dense, solid, and stable. Because of this, they have very high smoke points. You can subject them to severe heat in a skillet or an oven, and their molecular integrity remains intact.
They don't break down into toxins?
They don't break down, they do not oxidize, and they do not become inflammatory.
That makes total sense. So the toxic oils are swapped out, and the cooking foundation is solid. Now, how do we actively bring in the firefighters? How do we introduce the omega-3s to start putting out the generalized inflammation that's already burning in our systems?
You want to prioritize whole, nutrient-dense foods that naturally carry high payloads of biologically active omega-3 fatty acids.
Like what?
The absolute gold standard for human absorption is wild-caught cold water fish. Salmon is incredible. Mackerel and sardines are also phenomenal sources.
What if you don't eat fish?
If you are looking to supplement with plant-based sources, walnuts, flax seeds, and chia seeds are incredibly potent additions.
And the beautiful thing is that these are very easy to incorporate. You don't have to become a Michelin star chef to eat this way. Not at all. You can throw a tablespoon of chia seeds or ground flax seeds into your morning smoothie. You can sprinkle crushed walnuts over a salad or mix them into a bowl of oatmeal. You can aim to have a piece of wild-caught salmon with some leafy greens a couple of times a week. It's about small, consistent additions.
Exactly. Consistency is key.
But what about the hidden traps? We talked about the oils in our pantry, but what about the things we buy already made?
This is where extreme vigilance is required. You have to severely restrict or ideally eliminate your intake of fried foods, commercial baked goods, and highly processed prepackaged snacks.
Because even if I am at home diligently cooking my salmon in grass-fed butter, if I buy a box of cookies, the food industry already used the cheap seed oils in the factory.
Exactly. The hidden traps are the real challenge of the modern diet. You absolutely cannot trust the marketing on the front of a package.
It's all just designed to sell.
A box of crackers or a granola bar might scream heart healthy, all natural, or plant-based in giant letters. But if you flip that box over and actually read the tiny print on the ingredient label, you will almost certainly find soybean oil, corn oil, or sunflower oil listed right near the top.
It's so frustrating.
You have to become a militant label reader. It is genuinely shocking how many supposedly health-conscious packaged foods are secretly loaded with industrial seed oils simply because they are cheap preservatives. If you see soy, corn, canola, or sunflower oil on that ingredient list, put the box back on the shelf.
The rule of thumb seems to be prioritize whole, single-ingredient, unprocessed foods. If you buy a piece of fish, an avocado, or a head of broccoli, it doesn't have an ingredient label, which means you are entirely in the clear.
That's the best way to shop.
And speaking of the broccoli, the research also highlights the importance of adding specific anti-inflammatory boosters to your diet to help repair the oxidative damage that the seed oils have already caused.
Yes, alongside fixing the fundamental fat ratio, you want to actively flood your system with dense antioxidants.
What are the best sources for that?
The primary recommendations in the literature are dark green leafy vegetables, cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cauliflower, and dark berries like blueberries and blackberries.
What do they actually do?
These foods are packed with vital micronutrients and natural antioxidant compounds that directly support your cellular repair processes. They help sweep up and neutralize the residual oxidative stress caused by years of chronic inflammation.
I think the most important takeaway as we map out all these actionable steps is that this is not an exercise in demanding absolute flawless perfection.
No, perfection isn't sustainable.
It is not about declaring that you will never consume a single microgram of omega-6 ever again for the rest of your life. We already established that your biology requires them in small amounts. It is about making smart, deliberate, daily choices that fundamentally shift that massive 15-to-1 ratio back toward a state of healthy balance. It is about the power of consistency over time.
That is the perfect mindset to have. Your biology is remarkably forgiving and resilient. If you make smarter, more informed choices, day after day, swapping the oil in your frying pan, taking 5 seconds to read the label on a snack, throwing some walnuts into your breakfast, those small, seemingly insignificant daily changes compound rapidly into massive systemic impacts on your long-term health trajectory.
It really is an incredible journey we have taken today on this deep dive. We started by looking at the cheap, hyper-convenient seed oils hiding in plain sight in our grocery stores and our pantries. We uncovered the fascinating history of how they replaced traditional fats and how that shift severely distorted our intake, turning a basic essential nutrient into a biological stressor that sparks a literal wildfire of chronic inflammation inside our tissues.
And we examined the very real clinical consequences of that chronic inflammation.
The UCLA trial.
The data from the UCLA trial on prostate cancer provided undeniable, profound proof that a diet heavy in seed oils actively accelerates tumor aggressiveness. It showed us exactly how excess omega-6s trigger the inflammatory COX-2 enzyme and promote the terrifying process of angiogenesis to build blood vessels that feed abnormal cancer cells.
But crucially, we also saw the incredible, empowering power of the turnaround. We learned that by simply flipping the script, by throwing away the canola oil, cooking with stable fats like butter or tallow, and actively eating omega-3 rich foods like wild salmon and chia seeds, we can put out that internal fire.
You can reverse the damage.
We can mute the inflammatory cytokines, optimize our metabolic function, protect our cardiovascular system, and quite literally slow the physical progression of disease.
The overriding central message of all this data is one of profound biological agency. Your health is, in a very tangible way, in your own hands. The medical system is obviously vital, but the true foundation of your biological resilience is built right in your kitchen.
It's all about what you put on your plate.
By understanding these cellular mechanisms and by understanding exactly why these fats matter, you are taking active control of your own cellular pathways.
It changes everything. It is a totally different way of looking at a plate of food. It is not just about fuel or calories. It is a literal software update for your cells. Which leaves me with one final thought, something I really want you to chew on as you go about your week, as you navigate the grocery store aisles, and as you look at the food you are about to eat. If simply shifting our ratio of dietary fats by a few percentage points can literally starve a tumor of its blood supply and drastically alter the course of a disease, what other supposedly fixed or inevitable conditions in our bodies are just waiting for the exact right nutritional key to be turned?